who didn't want us to know about him, then we wouldn't have been created with the ability to even consider the idea. Yet most people do. If this all-powerful Creator God wanted us to know about him, he would make himself known to every single one of us in an obvious and undeniable way. However, this is not the case, demonstrating the lack of existence of such an entity. The real problem of evil. Why does God cause unnecessary suffering, natural disasters, infant mortality rates and so forth? Christians will claim as a result of the fall of Adam. So either 1. Omniscience, God didn't know that Adam would fall. 2. All-powerful, God did not choose/decide the consequences of the fall, and God could not have designed a world in which unnecessary suffering would not result from Adam's fall. 3. Not all good, God designed a world that could or would have unnecessary suffering as a consequence of Adam's fall. Conclusion, so, either God is 1. Not all-knowing, 2. Not all-powerful, or 3. Not all good. The Garden of Eden. On the story of the fall of man. Genesis 3, Adam did not have the knowledge of good and evil before he ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Can Adam have free will without the knowledge of good and evil to freely choose? Genesis 2:17 God has said, "But you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it you will certainly die." L. Genesis 3:4-5 You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman. For God knows that when you eat from it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. T. Genesis 3:7 Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. T. This demonstrates that the serpent told the truth. T. And God lied to them. L. God then unjustly punished them, knowing that they didn't have knowledge of good and evil prior to eating from the tree. Isaiah 45:7 I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create evil. Furthermore, this problem extends to the Christian concept of hell. If hellfire is eternal damnation and eternal punishment for sins, and if all sins result in hellfire regardless of whether a teenager steals a piece of candy, or a man gas chambers 6 million people, then God is not just nor loving. God punishes children for their father's sins, Exodus 20:5, and punishes David's wives for David's sins, 2 Samuel 12:7-12. God is not just. Justice requires people not being punished for crimes they didn't commit. Also, a just punishment can't be the same for every criminal, regardless of the crime. The Christian will claim that God is merciful, however mercy is the suspension of justice, and therefore God cannot be both merciful and just. Justice. Honorable and fair in one's dealings and actions. Properly due or merited. The concept of salvation through Jesus presents significant problems. It exemplifies the idea of one person taking on another's punishment. If anyone can simply believe in Jesus to be forgiven of sins, then God is not genuinely punishing individuals with eternal hellfire for their sins, but rather for the thought crime of not believing in Jesus. Consider the injustice of a child who steals a piece of candy and subsequently dies without accepting Jesus as his Lord and Savior, only to be condemned to burn in eternal hellfire. Meanwhile, a man who orchestrates the deaths of 6 million people could end up in heaven simply by accepting or believing in Jesus on his deathbed. This scenario illustrates an absurd abuse of the very definition of justice.